will come in constantly throughout the week, throughout the day, and they were discussing the social issues.
Right, right. Now that's a great point. That's a great point.
So when you talk about, barbershops, and yeah, I'm gonna throw in those beauty salons as well.
Yeah, you can't. I forgot. You can't overlook it. That's the good part.
But we also want those women looking good, so they had to go to those beauty salons and do their thing. But here's the other piece. You use the word in your vernacular, was. And my brother Jackson next to me, man, we throw balls and strikes. What do we need to do to get back there? Because, I'm going to go ahead and put it out there. There's a reason why we're sitting here tonight.
Yeah, how do we go from the was to the is?
There you go.
Easy. We just have to come back and start patronizing. Even though we may be shaving our own hair and our grooming, we can always try to work it into our calendars to come back to the community, to the heart of the city, the beat, and feel the pulse.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's get this conversation started. Again, this is Let's Talk About It. Let's Talk Network. We're here in conjunction with the Delta Xi Lambda alumni chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha. We're here at Weston Kennedy, and we're going to be talking about voter education, voter apathy, and voter rights. Who wants to get us started off? Brother Love,
we got to tell people where they can find us. You can go to Facebook on Let's Talk Nation USA and find us. And if you don't have a social media platform that you're on, you can go to ltnnetwork.net and view us on the web. But you know what? To start this conversation, I think this has to be connected to all the different generations. And we got a young brother sitting in a barber chair. And he's not sitting there for a cut, though. And I'm referring to none other than Brother CJ Battle. Hey, man, welcome tonight. Appreciate you being out here.
Appreciate you having us.
And your leadership.
Hey, appreciate you, sir.
So what has pulled you to be a part of this? Because, in the last couple of hours, we do our due diligence, man. And I heard as a young brother, you're doing a lot of work out there in the community.
Hey, appreciate it, man. But through the work of Alpha Phi Alpha DXL chapter, we're trying to make sure we're more engaged and involved in the community. And if we're going to be true advocates, then we have to provide platforms to not only get messages out, but also provide platforms for people to be heard. That's pretty much what's been going on for a lot of the voter apathy as far as not turning out to the poll because people don't feel like they're being heard.
Well, young people in particular. So can you speak to that?
Well, now, before he does that, now, Brother Love, we dispelled this myth a couple of weeks ago when we were on 94.5.
Yes.
Brother Battles was there, Brother Pinto was there. And there was a show where we had some people call in. And what we found out is that in addition to our younger generation, to our young minds that's coming up, there are a lot of older individuals that have started to develop voter apathy. So we need to hit this from all sides. But let's start with the group that we normally focus on that we feel aren't going to the polls, aren't educating themselves on voting. And that is the millennials, the younger generation. So let's talk to it from that standpoint, Brother CJ.
And young guy, hey, come on, we got a seat over here for you in the camera. No.
Get the cut.
Hey, that's a chair, not a hot seat.
Okay, I'm gonna feel this later.
So voter apathy, Brother CJ Battles. Talk to us about what you're seeing in your generation that is either preventing people from going to the polls or making them disinterested from going to the polls.
For the most part, again, is that people don't often feel heard. It's like we say that these issues are important, and none of those laws make it on the ballot. None of those issues are seemingly moved. So how do you feel like we're and especially if all that people do, for generations now, politicians tend to only come around when it's time for votes. And these days, with the efficiency of the algorithms, they don't come around as frequently because they want to keep voter numbers down because they want their reliable blocks. They go to the same tried and true neighborhoods, same tried and true institutions or organizations that they typically go to, and feel like if you're not showing up, they just all together just started ignoring you. And apparently it's big money in keeping people at home.
Now, that's interesting. And Brother Pence, I'm going to throw this your way because Brother Battles has said something that's very interesting. And I think he's right about this. He's saying that a lot of the politicians want to keep the numbers low because they have a certain block. And here's the interesting thing, Brother Rackman, too. Here's the interesting thing. In the city of Orlando, particularly with seat 5, Regina here. How many people do you think are inside of her district?
Good question.
Or Orlando's district 5?
So I don't know the exact number,
Mhm.
but based on what you're saying, what you're going to go, I'm sure.
Yeah.
It probably doesn't take too much to win.
Well, let's put the numbers out there like this. I want to say it's approximately 20,000 individuals in her district.
Yeah.
Do you know how many votes she got to win that seat?
I'd probably say less than 6,000.
Try less than 3,000.
Yeah.
I'm not
You
surprised.
see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so to Brother Battle's point, and not to say that this is something that's being done by Commissioner Hill or anyone else, but they know that only so many people are coming out to vote. And if you target and you speak to those individuals, you don't have to worry about the other. I mean, what's the percent? What's that? 10% of the less than 10% of the
Less than
voters?
10%.
Or about, yeah,
Less than 10%.
5%.
Now, is that registered voters you talking about, or total
That's the registered voters. That is registered voters in that area.
20,000?
Yeah, a little over 20.
And think about this, and I'm glad we're having this conversation. And I got to give it up to the Alphas again, because this is a conversation that we need to have. If you think about the fact that in District 2, Orange County, you got a population in Pine Hills alone that's larger than the second largest municipality of the city of Apopka. And people we hear about the complaints about streets. We hear the complaints about crime. We hear the complaints about the lack of economic development and the focus on small businesses in those communities. But Pine Hills population is more than the second largest municipality in Orange County.
In other words, with those numbers, they could change the complexity and the outcome of virtually any race, whether it's in Orange County or whether it's in the city where they sit.
Yeah.
You know?
But so that's why we're having this conversation, right? And I've mentioned to you before that I had the feeling that voters truly weren't being heard, right? So it's one thing when you have a communication, you have to have a true dialogue. And they feel as though it's a straight monologue, right? Show up just when it's time to vote, and that is it. But like you said, there are a lot of concerns, and the concerns for the most part are being addressed, but people aren't being educated to what they're doing from point 1, 2, and 3. And I said to you before, the reason why we're here, everyone keeps complaining about what's not being done for them, but they're not taking the initiative to do something for themselves, like checking their voter registration.
Yeah,
right.
So, I was just talking to you about, what, I could find out about what's going on with Jada Pinkett, Will
Yeah.
Smith, and everybody else. And I have a half an hour conversation where I don't really care. But ask me if you register to vote or if you can even vote at all.
Mhm.
Let's have you check to make sure it's okay.
Mhm.
And then
you
one
know,
thing
they
is-
show up for that one point. And
Right.
people
Yeah.
are like, I don't want to do it. It's not interesting. It's not sexy to me.
Brother Ellis lit a fire, because we're going to get into this tonight. And y'all can jump on me now if you want to, but I'm going to go ahead and say this. Is it a good and smart business model to only go and advocate to those politicians that look like you?
Mm.
Come on.
So
Not just that just look like you, but that are the same party
You're right.
as you.
You're right.
I mean, you're essentially looking at it sounds very similar to the retail market research.
Yeah.
Like, all right, who is our target audience? Who's gonna actually walk through these doors, and who's gonna show up to
Hey,
us?
for somebody who didn't want to come sit in the seat when I said that, somebody start moving through. So yeah, we want to hear what you got to say.
Listen back to you because you sat in that seat. So what do you think from your perspective, sitting in that seat temporarily?
While I was sitting in that seat,
And when we talk about the seat, let's look at perspective. So Brother Love has the distinction of being the first African American to serve as the Orange County District 2 Commissioner.
Yes.
And he was actually appointed by the governor to sit in that seat for how long, Brother Love?
a year.
For a year.
Wow.
And so he had an opportunity firsthand, thanks Brother Ellis for bringing that up, firsthand to sit and see what the issues were that were important to the people. So do me a favor and answer Brother Ellis' question.
So I'm gonna ask you a question. What I had to do in a short period of time is negotiate. There's a Tech Center in Apopka that never was there before. That you can actually go get a trade at this Tech Center. One of the things I had to do sitting in that seat is realizing that you got to barter back and forth. Here's what my community needed. Here's what the people within my community was telling me that they need. Economic development. They wanted to make sure that their children were safe in their community, but I couldn't do that in a funnel. And so when I say, and this is no disrespect to anybody, but man, we see a failed business model year in and year out. We go into the same folk, and we're not going to everybody to negotiate what it is we want. And that's a problem.
Yeah, that's a very
Amen.
good point.
Amen.
So we're being joined by brothers here tonight. We have Brother Kamar that's just joined in, coming to join us.
Come on. You have to
See, but at least we had him here for a while. Because we don't have a seat, brother.
And then also, Brother Love, we acknowledge him when he came in, but we just got to give a big shout out to Brother Jordan Bowles from UCF. He's a brother from UCF. Thanks for coming out this evening. We appreciate you as well. We're going to be talking to you a little bit too about college campuses, what's taking place with young individuals voting and apathy, or the fire that's being lit in the young population over there as well. All right.
Hey, I don't want to put Brother Ellis on the spot, but I saw something that took place that I'm a big critic of. We learn our trade. And when I say we, and I'm going to consider myself one of those elder statesmen, if you would, where we're getting this experience, we're navigating through this process, and then unfortunately at times some of us want to die with all this institutional knowledge, but we need to understand there's a time to pass the baton. And Brother Ellis, I saw what you did. That was smooth, brother. That was smooth. Because now we got another young brother sitting in that seat, and we're going to have continued conversation. But it does come a point in time where we got to understand we got to pass the baton.
Yeah. So the conversation, Brother Kumar, is we're talking about voter apathy. And a lot of times when we think about voter apathy, we think about the younger generation. But what we're starting to see also is that we're seeing apathy in the older folks, the 40s and the 50s and sometimes the 60-somethings. What is it that you attribute to it, that you can attribute to not the younger folks, but the older generation starting to become more apathetic towards the voting process?
So a lack of incremental change, and as society is progressively gets harder and change progressively gets slower. And then as people who have gone through life and you start off when you're young, in your 20s, and with an ideal how things should go, and then you start to lose that ideal, life starts chipping away at that ideal every year, and then you start to kind of grow a little bit apathetic to the process. And you say, well, you know what, I voted in regards to this person or this law or this particular thing, and it hasn't really changed, but I know my life has changed in that things have not gone the way they've gone. Sometimes you project the system and has some of the failures that happen in your own life, but also, the fallibility of politicians. I fail people because oftentimes people run for office and they project altruistic means, but they don't really feel those ideals. And then you start to learn as they continue to matriculate through the system. They're there only for self-preservation or preservation of the system, not really to change the system. And that becomes tiring to watch, right? Because you vote for change. It's like unless we live in a monarchy and then we just want the same thing. People vote continually because they want to see something change. They want to see a vibrant new voice. And then, I take the recent situation that's happening in Israel and Gaza. I think it's more tangible now, that you can see. There was one point in time where if you said something that was, against the government of Israel, people would jump down. But then you're seeing around the world how everybody's, starting to speak up and be more vocal. But social media has provided that. But I will tell you, it's just not younger people. It's all people throughout age. And what is it? It's people who have, you know what? I don't want to be a part of a system that is oppressive in any way, even if it's not it doesn't affect me directly, but it's still represents an oppressive system. And you know, just like a fisherman can see a fisherman from a mile away, a salesman can see a salesman from a mile away, the oppressed can see the oppressed from a mile away. And so, like, I don't have to look across. I can look across the pond, and I can see that there's a group of people who are being subjugated and treated like second class citizens, or not even treated like citizens, just subjugated and we're gaslit into telling them that they deserve their subjugation, they deserve their torment because of some, whether it's militaristic or societal function of this person is better than the other. And then imagine going through that on two spectrums. Imagine going through that for like 40, 50, 60 years, and you see it, you know it, you recognize it, and then the information now becomes more readily apparent to you, and you see it, and then they gaslight you and they tell you that what you're, who are you going to believe, your lying eyes or your truthful ears, right? And so you go through that, and then you have a young person who's seen this, who now they have the same information on social media, and they're seeing it, and then you have politicians who you voted for telling you, no, don't worry about that. Still, adhere to the policy or adhere to the rubric or whatever that we're telling you. That can desensitize you towards the process. So you have an amalgamation of like this a failure of the system and failure of people understanding, that people don't have the appetite anymore just to be fed the same thing, and then not being able to like see the change on the menu.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, Brother Bowles, let me ask you this question because your brother Kamar's position on things, and I hear what you're saying because a lot of folks feel that that they don't go out to vote because they don't feel that things change. Now, how old are you? 22. You've already been through one voting cycle. All right. When you hear that, getting into voting early on in your life now, that potentially the path ahead of you is 40 years from now, you look up and things haven't changed. How does that make you, as a young voter coming up in this system, how does that make you feel when you hear that?
So, I mean, it's definitely discouraging. One thing I will say, to a point that was raised a couple minutes ago, when it comes to my generation, what I do observe is that there's a population of my generation that are very vocal, and they iterate very clearly when they disagree with things. And I believe that's the population of our generation, no matter how small it is, that are very active when it comes to voting. Then there is a generation that sees, okay, well, this, and that has not changed over this amount of time. And I believe that's really the aspect of my generation that I guess feel like their voices aren't heard. And in turn, why, what's the purpose of voting if what we're saying isn't showing up on the menu?
That's real interesting. And here's what I want to ask the question, and I don't want to put anybody on the spot, Brother Ratley. but here's what we've seen. Here's what we've all witnessed. Something happens, and we get engaged in it, and I call it the M&M factor. We'll get engaged in that moment in a significant issue, but it's for that moment. What's the difference, brother, between that moment and an actual movement?
The difference between a moment and an actual movement is that you actually can see the effects of the moment taking place within society. In 2020, when George Floyd happened, murder of George Floyd, there was a palpable fever within society worldwide. And you saw a lot of people grasp onto that murder, and it was an emotional outpouring of how people felt. And now, I would have loved to. You saw an initial,
Mhm.
you know, you saw people, companies doing, trying to do their best to adhere to like, it's be more inclusive and things of that nature. And I knew that in 2020 that the person at the time was not going to stay in office because you had this energy and people had to express it in a certain way, and they didn't really. If you were marching, going, okay, what next on the menu? Oh, here comes November, right? And okay, you know, let's vote for, you know, let's vote for a change. 'Cause people, when they have this energy, they're like looking to change, and then they voted, and then you started seeing also, as a result, also other paradigm society. We started trying to get rid of the same things that were instituted in 2020. Started seeing these same companies that, you know, we're going to kind of, you know, walk back that stuff. And then you started seeing a certain party start vilifying the, you know, diversity and inclusion. And, you know, and so what happens, right? So that moment that turned into movement to voting, then now has gone reverse. And then people are looking up like, wait a minute, like this didn't really turn out to the thing that I expected, you know, because we romanticized like the civil rights movement from the 60s. It's like, okay, we're going to start getting more active. But what people don't understand is that that was not, civil rights movement didn't start in the 50s. It started in the early 1900s.
Yeah.
And so it took 50 plus years just for America to start listening to that particular.
Here's a good break. If you're listening or if you're watching this show, you're watching the Alpha Brothers here, and I'll defer to my good friend here, but you're listening to Let's Talk Nation, and we're having a conversation about the importance of voting. But I will tell everybody here, I'm gonna tell you the difference between a moment and a movement, and I'm gonna just really make it real simple. $49,750,000,000. I'm gonna tell you the significance of that. When George Floyd, as you mentioned, was taking place, and we saw this, what everybody thought was a movement around the country. Everybody else thought it was a movement. It happened to be a moment because corporate America committed $50 billion. Hey, you know how much we realized since then? $250 million. So the difference in a movement and a moment is doggone $49,750,000,000 that wasn't realized.
Well, I think Brother Pinto said something very interesting when the question was, what's the difference between a moment and a movement? And what was the word you used? Commitment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I heard Brother Kamari kind of say the same thing, because the civil rights movement did not start in the 50s. It started in the early, in the early 20th century. And if you want to go back to the Niagara movement and things like that. When you talk about commitment, Brother Pinto, and then Brother Brack, I didn't forget about you yet. When you talk about commitment, what is that level of commitment that you're talking about that moves it from a moment to a movement?
It's just being intentional, and I'm a personalizer, right? You know, I'm not originally from here, right? But when it comes to being intentional and being committed, as far as, okay, if I want to see any kind of change, what do I need to do? Ask questions, be inquisitive, be curious, right? But most importantly, just vote. So even if things stay the same, I don't lose hope. I still keep my focus and make those calls, right? And I even call myself out. There are many times I haven't even called my local representative. I don't want to blame DC. Forget DC. My insurance is expensive in Florida.
Yeah.
I need to call my local representative in my county, in my district, right? And that's a simple conversation that people should do, right? That's a commitment to myself and my family, my pocketbook, right? So when I think about, when I hear conversations at work, I hear conversations that don't pertain to me, right? But they have impact across the board. But at the end of the day, I'm just committed to hearing from other people. I mean, Brother Love, you mentioned, voting for someone else that may not look like you, but may represent a different party. I don't care. If they represent my best interest,
Exactly.
and at the end of the day, if they represent a majority of people, not a few, and that's why I'm kind of, I feel, say like a quiet giant, sleeping giant is being awoken in me to the point that anybody who wants to share, change my mind about my points of view, I don't mind. because I feel it's honest and it's good to be committed to learn more from one another. I mean, it's America, you know, we're supposed to be able to speak freely and not feel like you're offending someone.
And agree to
right?
disagree.
Absolutely, but that's
Right.
gone.
Right.
You know, but at the same time, for me, I just want to have an honest conversation because I'm not going to say that I walk around knowing everything. These brothers in here, man, every brother that's in here, I've learned something from somebody, right? Whether or not we got along immediately, but it's to the point that I have a little curiosity. I'm inquisitive. I just want to learn more. So to me, I'm committed to humanity at the end of the day, right? And if I know I can vote for somebody that's going to have your interest, your interest, your interest, I'm going to vote for that person. all
But
day, every day.
sometimes it doesn't even have to be my interest, his interest, his interest. It's sometimes the interest of the people that's right there in the same household, and how the person that's going into that office is going to affect the generations to come that's in your family. Now, brother Rackley, we just finished talking to Brother Bowles not too long ago, and we just kind of talked about how, you know, when he looks at it, just, you know, new to voting, you know, just getting into this game, how it's kind of discouraging to hear that perhaps things may not change. You've been voting for how long, Brother Rackley?
Since 84.
84?
Yes, 1984.
And you've continually gone to the polls since 1984.
Yes, sir.
What keeps you going to the polls? What is it where you don't say nothing has changed, I'm sitting this one out? Why do you continue to go to the polls?
I'm hopeful. That's the word I use. I'm hopeful, and if I can see, I know things may not change like really quick, but if we can make incremental changes, and my household benefits, and my neighborhood benefits, my community benefits, my people, you know, I think it's worth it. So I believe that if we incrementally keep seeking change, keep working, and keep be determined and not take our eye off of the target, we'll do better. But we may not even in my lifetime, they may not achieve everything that I want us to achieve. But if I can look back at my children and my grandchildren eventually, you know, they have a better life because of what we do today, I think it's worth it. So I'm hopeful.
I have this question. When we talk about things not changing and people feeling like things aren't changing, do you tie that into what most people say about Black voters? And let's just go ahead and just get it out there already.
Yeah.
What people say about Black voters is that Black voters vote Democrat, point blank and period. And no matter what, Black voters will vote Democrat. We are the most consistent and the most reliable block of votes for the Democratic Party. Do you think that in any way contributes to the apathy of things not changing?
Well, let's first remember we hadn't always been Democrats.
You're right.
Remember, we came from the party of Lincoln, so majority of us were Republicans. And until the '60s, when then because of the incident, we switched over to the Democrat Party. But I think it's more in voting, and we'll go back, piggyback to brother what Bob said at the beginning. We got to learn how to strategize.
Mm-hmm. Actually, it became. It was actually Lincoln, not Lincoln, I'm kidding. Lincoln, it was President.
Johnson?
No, not Johnson.
Well, while y'all think about that, we got a listener that just chimed in and said, while y'all talking about incremental change, Deion Sanders showed change can be fast, even though we're talking about mathematics.
So I actually agree with it.
Say again, I'm sorry.
I said I actually agree with the caller. It's a lot of times we gotten so accustomed to there's not really been big change probably since all those what they now call them civil rights laws of the late '60s passed by Johnson, well championed by the Johnson administration, but actually did pass with bipartisan support in the Congress. A lot of times we forget that as if one party really did it all. Now, Johnson being the former president of the Senate, he knew how to wrangle votes on both sides. But to the point of the caller about us getting big change is we've gotten so used to getting crumbs and just being thankful with that. We see it in our fundraising, we see it in the jobs that we go for, we don't negotiate. And that was going to be the question that I was going to ask is, how can we show our the various communities that don't turn out, maybe they don't turn out because we're not showing them how to do the acts. The way I've always looked at voting is it is these signature on the contract that's already been negotiated. And if anybody came to you and you have not asked for anything, then why do you think anything in that contract is going to benefit you?
Right. So I wouldn't say it was Nixon. But here, the story is that Nixon didn't, when MLK was
In jail?
and he sent out the jail channels to Nixon, because Nixon actually was amenable to helping Black people, despite, the
Current representation.
Yeah, and so, but Nixon didn't want to get involved in state issues. So he's like, I can't just tell them to release you. And then there was this young senator who, saw the opportunity, and through
And he didn't want to do it.
he didn't want to do it, but he saw the advantage.
His brother saw
Bobby
it.
talked him into it.
No, his father told Bobby, and he said that this can be a way in to that community if we lean on it and we do the right thing. We'll just do the thing. I just have to do the thing.
Yeah.
And so MLK he was gracious because of that, and he threw support behind behind Kennedy. Now here's the thing: Nixon was so incensed by that betrayal that it started actually, some might think, actually hurt us in the long run, because he went around to all of his people within that party, including his former strategists who helped create what we now deem as like the Southern strategy, right? And so but he felt betrayed by how Black people in that moment went over to the Democratic Party. But here's what, and goes to the F. MLK said, I will go and help you get into the White House if you make civil rights, one of your central tenets in your administration.
But going to something that you both alluded to, what you're talking to, is the numbers, right?
Right.
Because you said it just took a matter of mere numbers, not a lot, to get people in position of office, right, where they can make decisions. So to me, if you don't participate by either voting, right, we encourage people to vote, you have something to talk about anyway.
Yeah.
So at least be able to flex by your vote. That's the one thing to me that's equal among everybody. Whether you're wealthy, poor, homeless, it doesn't make a difference.
Right.
That's the one thing you can exercise that can have an impact or change.
So can we go back to Rob earlier, talked about his role as a representative. And one thing I do know is that when you are like one of 6 commissioners, you only have one vote.
One vote.
Yeah.
And then what you really have to do, if you want a sidewalk in your community, you got to vote for something else in their community to get 3 more votes. And a lot of people don't understand that.
Yeah.
We think that Rob's going to get in office and immediately change things. Well, he got to get in office and compromise to
And
benefit his
compromise,
community.
negotiate. But then and I love this conversation because this is interactive. We're learning some things, and then, brother, when you start taking everybody down memory lane from a historical perspective, and Brother Ellis jumped in and say, "Hey, remember now, Black folk were majority Republican before they became Democrats." It led me to say and ask the question to everybody here, and I'm asking this question sincerely among brothers. What other ethnic population that is 95%
Zero.
in one party, and then year in, year out, you have the expectation of living better, but when there's a change in this big house they call the White House, there's one population that may not eat because, and you could disagree with me, but I look at it, and some people may say it's not a business plan. I look at it as a failed business plan. I look at Hispanics.
And I was going to say that, Brother Love, and that's the perfect segue to this. Let's talk a little bit about the Hispanic community and compare that to the African American community. How many of us feel that the Hispanic vote is stronger than the Black vote, just in general? Yeah. if it garners more weight, more power than the African American vote, if people pay more attention to their votes than they do to the black vote.
Oh, I would say,
I would say it depends on where they came from.
and I'm gonna say it from a business model perspective. I'm gonna say yes, because if you look at Florida in particular, not nationally, but Florida, the Hispanic population is about 24-25%. The African American population in Florida is about maybe 14-15%. Now, if you dig deeper, and Brother Jackson was going here earlier, if you dig deeper and look at the registered voters per population, per ethnicity, man, we fall off. It's like falling off a cliff.
But this is the other thing too. So when I talk about that, I look at where does the dollars go when folks start running for office. And I want to say it may have been 2018, 2019. The Democratic Party sent $150,000 to the Central Florida area to attract Hispanic votes. A good friend of mine, Cesar Figueroa, asked the question because she's a political strategist. Where are those same dollars for the African American community?
They don't send it.
They stopped.
30 days before the election.
Yeah, they don't send
It's like,
it. Yeah,
but why-
it's nationwide, by the way. Not just there, it's nationwide. They go to those hot markets where they know they have the best return, right? But again, it's almost like 14% to me is still a number, right? But you won't get the dollars filtered down here.
but to Brother Love's point, why would you spend money for something that you already know that you got?
No, that's not true.
But they don't have it though based on the last election cycle. Because when you look at the numbers, when you look whether it's early voting, mailing, or the day of, as brothers, we didn't show up.
Well, now,
In 2016, in multiple cities, we definitely did.
Well, now, when they find that Trump got 17% of the African American vote as a victory, that lets us know that the majority of the African American vote is with the Democratic Party.
I also think that a lot of times they forget that we're often not as big on being single issue voters as a lot of other demographics are. And I know that, for Governor DeSantis' first time running for office, that was an extremely close race. And when you did the analysis, as I'm pretty sure Brother Williams can speak to, one of the issues that could have swung the Gilliam's campaign's way is they did not have an adequate response to all the mothers who were depending on
Sending their kids to child school vouchers.
right. They didn't even have an answer for it, and that alone would have carried them over the top.
Yeah, I think if you're gonna, it's not analogous Hispanic voters, Latin voters, and Black voters, because number one, in Hispanic culture, there are like several different, iterations of that cultural vibe, right? So you have in South Florida, Cubans are not the same as
Puerto Rican.
Puerto Ricans in New York, and not the same, and Puerto Ricans in New York are not the same as Puerto Ricans on Island. Puerto Ricans on Island are overwhelmingly conservative, right? Then you have Mexicans in Texas, tend to be a little more conservative than Mexicans in California and in Arizona, right? And so, like, the thing is, one of the things unspoken what we don't talk about within why they target certain communities. Let's just look in the state of Florida, because that's where we live in. Is the idea of upholding white supremacy, and so white supremacy plays a big deal in how they view particular groups. Cubans, for example, Cubans in the state of Florida, especially older Cubans, they come from a space to where, if you know the history of Cuba and why a lot of Cubans came over to this particular to Florida, is because they were escaping Castro, and Castro wanted to get rid of a certain class within Cuba, and then you have a lot of fair-skinned Cubans who tend to have a. I'm being very honest. Yeah, they have a lot of fair-skinned Cubans who have an idea of, how they view not only darker-skinned Cubans, right, but then ultimately how they view darker-skinned people in general. Now, Hispanic culture and even Latin culture, there's a deep-seated mentality of how they want to actually internally adhere to whiteness. Like you look at how even Hispanic culture, Latin culture, you look at their TV shows, it's nothing but like fair-skinned people on TV, right? It's nothing. It's just, but there's an inherentness of like wanting to adhere to an idea of whiteness. Now, why that's appealable is because white supremacy recognizes, say, a fisherman recognizes a fisherman from a mile away. White supremacy recognizes that, where in Black culture, there's not inherentness to actually want to adhere to like wanting to be white. Whereas in a Hispanic or Latin, they say we can do certain touch tones, and we know that's going to appeal to them. We know that they want to be, ultimately, they want to assimilate into us.
So here's the thing.
No, but let me say this, because I've gotten 7 responses to this on the Facebook page, and one, no, we're not going to be extending this show tonight because we're going to give you something to come back for. And I mean, people are engaged in this process.
Yeah.
And brother, I gotta say this: I grew up doing the Mario boat lift in Miami.
Yeah.
Some Cubans I grew up with, good friends. They left Cuba because of oppression. But I tell you something else, that the African American population in Miami in the 80s was one of the fastest, largest growing minority ethnicities in Miami-Dade. I'm gonna tell you something that I saw my friends and their family do that were Cubans that I haven't seen us do. And I hate to be the bearer of some damn bad news, but man, they came from certain struggles to where they mobilized. They showed a unity factor, like I saw Black folk do when Obama ran for office. I haven't seen that again since then. And here's something I want to make sure the audience know, because I saw some messages in here. And no, we're not telling anybody who to vote for.
Yeah.
We're just educating you to go vote. But we got some young brothers, we got some old bulls in here, and we're having a good conversation.
So, you know, what we got to remember too, right? As a fraternity, we're not trying to tell someone who to vote for, where to go vote, right? We just want you to participate.
Correct.
Because all our efforts are nonpartisan, right? And like you said, this conversation it's engaging. And my thing is, I want to be out on the street where we have the same conversation, where we can smile, laugh, joke, break bread about it, right? But I also want to say, when you mentioned as far as the different Hispanic community or Latino community, right? I went to college at FIU, and they had that discussion about Cuba. I left that alone.
Yeah.
Because that whole conversation
Yeah.
can take so many segments, right? But at the end of the day, what I'm starting to realize from our efforts in the community with registering people to vote is trying to discuss pain points. And we all have similar pain points, no matter what color you are, sorry. But it's, okay, I need some more funding, right? I need to have a livable wage job, that kind of thing. And even though it sounds so vanilla, right? There are pain points that are out there, like I said, that people are truly not being heard what they're trying to experience. I mean, we're in Florida. You can have bus stops that don't have proper shelter. They just have a stand and a bus number. Why don't we have cover, right? That's something that we can change through the process of participating.
But in all fairness, too, again, it's not analogous with Cubans, because the thing is, they were invited in, we were taken, and there were laws really created against us. Redlining, you had. I mean, they literally created financial,
Absolutely.
and even after
All day.
even after desegregation, you still had wholesale economic limits to how we can grow within society. I don't know of a law that was created specifically for Hispanics against like economic growth.
Yes, it helps them out.
Right. In fact, what you saw is they were given more access to capital. There was a study in 2023 how a Wells Fargo was fined by the federal government for not providing billions of loans to Black.
But let me tell you, when we do, because I'm listening.
About voter education.
Okay.
Elections coming up. People have to know where they're going to find information.
You're right. I love you.
Let's talk about the voter education part, the voter apathy, and things like
And some
that.
data.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Early voting starts on October 28th, goes through November 5th. Please to participate. Go. They got that's for Orange County. So if you're in Seminole County or Osceola County or Lake County, please go to your office of
Supervisor
election.
yes.
There we go.
Yeah.
The links are there for all the places. And also what I love about early voting is that you're not relegated to just your precinct. You can go wherever
That's right.
wherever they have. Go vote right in there.
So now let's talk about this, because a lot of times people see these names on the ballot and they don't know who these people are. What are some suggestions to give people about how to find out who these people are that's on these ballots?
Google Ballotpedia.
Ballotpedia, yeah, how they vote. That's right.
I hate to give a shout out, but News 13, man, it's basic, but I like it, especially when you look at the amendments. They break it down pretty simple, right? And I think that's a good option.
I think it just comes down to interest. I don't think people have. I really hate to suffer fools, and I hate when people say, "I don't know how to do something," because like there's a little mini.
Yes.
Yes. And so when people say things like, "Oh, I don't know what's out there," I say, "Well, you don't have an interest of what's out there."
Yeah.
Because I guarantee if you wanted to know a recipe, you want to know what's going on as far as in pop culture, you would run to that. You know how to access Google, for things you're interested in. I don't like when I hear stuff like that, and I don't give into a level of willful ignorance.
So the funny thing is, when you look at the websites for candidates now, they no longer use coded words about how they feel in their positioning and what they would do when they get into any elected position. And I've been somewhat amazed but happy that they're just that candid, because I can honestly say that most of the ones I went to in the past election cycle, without looking at their party affiliation, I was able to say, I'm not voting for you.
So now when we talk about not looking at party affiliations, what folks need to know that there's certain races that don't have a party affiliation, such as folks that are running for county commission, people that are running for city government, city commission, and things such of that nature. But then you also have your partisan races, which are the state races. And Brother Love, what's going on in terms of the elections for the city of Orlando? What are we looking at?
City of Orlando, we have Mayor Buddy Dyer that's on the ballot. I don't remember how many opponents that he drew, but we also have 3 opponents. And then we also have Commissioner Bakari Burns, and that's District 6.
District 6, then you have Pat Sheehan for District 4.
Correct, and that's the City of Orlando. And then the state race for Representative Hawkins, who left to run a university. The special election, November the 7th, is coming up for that. Here's the question, because we normally get to this point where Greg and I have to be train conductors, and I don't want us to get right up to the point, but I think it's time to go around the room and say what it is that we want to make sure that we impart on the audience that we can do to impact vote.
If we can, if we have to get a family member or yourself and take them to early voting, or on election day, take them to the poll that don't vote. And I know that I have at least 10 family members in Orlando, that if I could have an impact just in my family, and if every one of us, between our family and friends, will take someone to the poll, that can make a difference in our election.
Absolutely. For the polls.
So you can honestly keep up with us through Instagram and also through Facebook, and we'll have different voting events, Voteless People is a Hopeless People, coming up either this semester or up into our spring semester. And so do social media.
Good work.
Simple, just go vote. I mean, I don't know what else to say. Just go vote. I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. We're not doing it. So make sure you go vote and tell someone else to go vote.
What about?
I would say, don't just only vote. Think about what's important to you and see if the people that are candidates for that race, if they actually have a record on anything of that, anything pertaining to that issue. A lot of times we treat voting as if, all right, we voted and we just hope for something else to come out of it. That's sort of like paying for a concert ticket and then turn around and never going inside the door. You just walk away. But you done paid your fare. You might as well get the most out of it. Follow up with those elected officials and make sure that they're being held accountable. Be like, hey, you promised me this. I want to see you at least work for it, even if you don't deliver. Let me see something.
Right.
I would say, first of all, figure out the job duties of that person. Like a lot of times people have irresponsible ideas about what a particular person does in a particular office. And just like you hear dumb things about the president, gas prices are rising, I'm blaming the president. You know, my rents, I'm blaming the president. You know, we don't understand, like, you know, the state attorney, you know, how come they're not, how come they're not arresting people? You know what I mean? Like people have these falsified ideas about candidates and roles. And so my thing is, yes, it's important to vote, but like, if you don't even know who you're voting for, what you're voting for, then what is you have to ask, what's your purpose? Are you just kind of going in there and just punching card? And a lot of people do. But that's also, I blame people also in the room, not blaming specifically, but like, I say you have to be loud about the candidates. A lot of times we're afraid to be an advocate or be expressive about voting, you know, because we don't want to seem like we're turning people. And if anybody follows me, they know that I'm not a shrinking violet when it comes to these things. I don't shy away from, you know, expressing my opinion on an issue or a candidate or anything because I'm afraid of, you know, incrimination from the outside world. That's just not authentic to me. And I think we need more people who are not afraid to be expressive, because guess what? Every election season, I get people hit me up both online or on the phone, and they ask me about candidates, but that's only because they know I'm accessible with my expressions. If we keep things inside and we're not being very truthful and authentic, then there are going to be people like, I don't really know who to ask. I don't know what to do. And so it's integral with everybody in the room. Like, you cannot be afraid to be expressive and talk about politics. So, you know, it's on the voter, and it's also on the advocate.
Brother Elvis.
Thank you. I think first and foremost, if you're not voting for yourself, you're voting for the future. And I think that's your purpose.
Short, sweet, to the point.
That's the point.
As they say, election has consequences.
You're right. You're right. Brother Alex, I got to say once again, we appreciate it. We appreciate that this was a brainchild of yours. And I mean, this discussion went way beyond what I even imagined we would get to. And from some of the responses, hey, Alphas, we got to do this again.
Yeah.
We got to do this again.
So once again, I mean, this has been Let's Talk Nation, Brother Love Greg Jackson, along with the Deltas Our Lambda chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha. Tonight's conversation, we hope, was one that is becoming of this great brotherhood, but also one that the community can take and get good information on what they need to do in order to move forward. There have been some outstanding points that have been brought out. There have been some historical references that have been brought out to help individuals to make some decisions. But at the end of the day, what we will say is that it's more important to use your voice, as Brother Pinto was saying. Just get out there and exercise the right to vote. And that's what we want to encourage. And we appreciate this opportunity. We want to say thanks to Dr. Light for doing what he does. Thanks to Brother Armando for being here tonight. Once again, we want to say thank you to Reggie Jones for allowing us to be here. All these brothers here tonight. I mean, you all brought light to this conversation. Like Brother Love was saying, I had to pull. You saw, I almost had to put him in the chokehold. He wanted to. But that's what tonight was about: sparking conversation in hopes of bringing this to more events like this, so that people can have open, respectful conversations and dialogue.
On this note, and we got 3 minutes, and we like to be precise because this show goes Spotify and everywhere else. Here's something that we talked about when we began. We talked about some of those trailblazers that sacrifice not for themselves. These are the folk that put themselves on the front line. And I like your historical perspective that you bring to the table, because we were talking about Jim Brown. We were talking about Kareem. Who are some of those folk that registers in your mind that were trailblazers, that were advocates for change?
You know, I look at people like Medgar Evers and A. Philip Randolph. You know, I know everybody likes to look at okay, rightfully so, but I look at for people who, you know, didn't necessarily get the feel, but they were like change agents in their time in their community. And although, Medgar Evers was brutally assassinated in his driveway, but he was somebody that you saw how he effectuated change and how people felt about him, and it still rallied people. I mean, he affected MLK. MLK was inspired by Medgar, and so, there are a lot of people locally. You think about, how. I mean, I'm not from Orange County, but you think about Father Pinder was a big change agent here,
Right.
and one of the things I don't think we talk about, even in the current chapter, like he was such a civil rights pillar in this community, and there are scores of generations here who don't understand how he desegregated counters here. And what he was, and Father Pinder was, as was never a shrinking Bible.
You're right.
He was loud even to his last breath.
Well, you know what? These are the kind of conversations that we have to have. I got to say once again to the Alpha fraternity, these are the kind of conversations that we got to continue to keep going. So, the General, Brother Jackson, man, I appreciate y'all letting me into y'all family tonight, because
You just hang around too many capitals.
Hey, I know Brother Ellis gonna be loud about that. But hey, y'all, I know y'all probably heard me tell Attorney Jackson this on many of our shows, and we're going into 6 years.
6 years.
And I say this with love to all the brothers here of Alpha, and I'm not just gonna say it to Greg right now, but y'all don't have to go home.
But you gotta get
You
out.
gotta get out of here. Hey, y'all, we'll see y'all next week on Let's Talk Nation. Hey, thank you for joining us.